y'all, and welcome to my channel. Today's video we are going to be diving back into Mirror's book 1. I haven't had a video out in a minute. It's been about 2 weeks actually. We've just had a lot going on, so today this one's going to be extra long. I've been wanting to make them a little bit longer. I think right now they're sitting at around 20 to 30 minutes. But I just kind of want to read until it feels like a good place to stop. So anyway, let's go ahead and dive on in, just in case you're listening to this in your car or if you're cleaning. I don't want to ramble on too much, so let's go ahead and jump in. Chapter 2, The Making of a Man. It was a week later and Saturday night again. As Sarah slipped under the covers, she smiled at me and said softly, "Another story tonight, Daddy? You can start where you stopped last time. They were getting on the bus." I smiled back at her. "You have a very good memory, and I'll start right there." Sarah settled deeper under the covers. "I always remember your stories, Daddy." So I began. The bus took them from Knoxville, Tennessee to Columbia, South Carolina, where they transferred to another bus. The first bus was a Greyhound loaded with men, women, and children, all going to different places. The second bus was also a Greyhound, but this one was loaded with men only, and all of them were going to one place. Parris Island, South Carolina, home of the famous, or should I say infamous, Marine Corps boot camp. The bus arrived on base in the dead of night. The night couldn't have been darker if they had planned it, which I'm sure they did. The bus rolled through the gate a short distance and stopped. The doors opened and on stepped Smokey the Bear. At least the hat reminded you of Smokey the Bear. The bear roared, "All right, you lazy maggots. You got about 60 seconds to get your lousy off this bus and onto the yellow footprints outside." He grabbed the first person he could get his hands on and tossed him off the bus, yelling, "All right, move, dang you, move, move." Occasionally he gave a little assistance as the men headed out the door. When you hit the blacktop, the yellow footprints were easily visible. You can still hear that voice in your head telling you what to do. You find the nearest set of footprints as the other drill instructors are yelling at you to hurry up. After everyone is standing at attention, well, then the fun begins. Now comes 3 months of the most intense training a young man is ever going to get. No man has ever left Parris Island the same as when he arrived. Sometimes that's not a good thing, and most times it is. The men complained about the physical training, the running, the push-ups, the set-ups, the forced marches, and other exercises too numerous to mention. For Chuck, it was the mind games they played that gave him the most problems. And there were a lot of mind games. Some people claim they brainwashed you, but Chuck didn't believe that. They do change you, both physically and mentally, though. Chuck didn't know it, but Jason was faring basically the same as he was. With all the confusion during the unloading of the bus, the two had become separated. They would not see each other again until the end of boot camp. Not exactly what they had planned. But things don't always go as planned. Another lesson the Marines taught well. Not everyone made it through Marine Corps boot camp, and most of the time no one knew what happened to those recruits who didn't make it through. When the lights go out, they're in their bunks, and when the lights come on, they're gone. There are other times when you know exactly what happened because they show you. Chuck was writing a letter home, just the way the drill instructor told him, with the exact wording he was to use, when all the men were put on the line. The door at the end of the barracks opened and in walked a drill instructor. He wasn't alone. He was leading a young recruit by the hand. The recruit seems unsure of his surroundings. He looked around the room, then down at the floor. He mumbled as he walked by, his word undistinguishable. The senior drill instructor led him down the center aisle of the barracks and stopped at the doors leading out the other end. "Take a good long look. This is what happens if you can't take it. And some of you can't take it. But don't worry, we'll find out who you are. By the time we're finished with you, you'll either be a Marine or you won't. Those of you who don't have what it takes, this'll be you in a couple of weeks. And trust me, if you can't cut it, we will find out here. Better to burn out here than over in Nam. At least here it's just you. Over there it could be your whole outfit. So buckle up and enjoy the ride. Because over there, we all might be in the same outfit. And we want to make sure you can drive, or at least make it through the ride." Chuck had little time to think about how Jason was doing. And Jason had no time to worry about Chuck. The Marines were determined to make you better as an individual, thus strengthening the Marines. The chain is only as strong as its weakest link, a philosophy the Marines took strongly to heart. Chuck and Jason were thankful for their days spent on the riverbanks and hills of southeastern Kentucky. Though their training was nothing compared to Parris Island, It was more than the other recruits had had. 3 months of running, marching, drilling, all designed to make you a better man. A man with pride in himself and the Marines. A man of honor and determination, willing to do whatever it takes to get the job done, all designed to make you a man, a Marine. For Chuck and Jason, the 3 months seemed to pass rather quickly. Not so for many others. Boot camp was over with 10 days of leave before they needed to report to their permanent duty station, Camp Lejeune, North Carolina. Boot camp was only the conditioning phase. They finally met up again as they boarded a bus bound for Harlan, Kentucky. They didn't spend much time together during leave, just the bus ride to Corbin where they split up. Jason went home to his family in Harlan, and Chuck continued on to his mother in Ohio. The two met up again on the bus ride back south. Chuck and Jason stayed at Camp Lejeune for the remainder of their training. Both were shipped to South Vietnam, referred to from this point simply as NAM. And both were members of the Marines' 3rd Force Recon Command. Now, like I said, boot camp had only been the conditioning program. Recon training was a different story. It was so intense that it could not be explained to most people. Unless you've experienced it for yourself, there is no understanding. Let's just say it was excellent training. Chuck was a big man, too big some thought. But he was strong, quick, and very agile for a man his size, and he quickly put to rest any doubt about his abilities. Jason was a big man too, normal size for Force Recon, so little was said to him about his size. They arrived in Nam in the fall of 1968. Chuck was there for over a year. Jason's stay wasn't that long. During their time in Nam, both became very hardened men. They saw things and did things that would make most men run and pray they never had to do it or see it again, only to have them do it again and again. Marine Corps boot camp was tough. Recon training was tougher, but nothing could prepare you for Nam. Nothing. Neither had seen a place like Nam. Their worst imaginings were not even close to the reality. When they stepped out of the helicopter at the base, just outside of Da Nang, a member of Recon Command met them. They were escorted back to their staging area where they met their commanding officer, First Lieutenant Brian McFarland. Lieutenant McFarland gave them a quick list of do's and don'ts. Don't salute, no wearing of rank, don't drink the water or eat the local food, stay away from the local women, and don't trust anyone. The lieutenant showed them to their living area, just a big old tent set up in a big clearing next to their other big old tents. It looked like any other staging area, people going places while others sat around drinking beer, smoking cigarettes, and telling crude jokes. They were both awakened early the next morning by a gentle shake of the shoulder and a quiet voice that said, "Up and at 'em, boys. We're hunting Cong this morning." Cong was short for Viet Cong. The North Vietnamese Army, the regular army of North Vietnam, and the Viet Cong, South Vietnamese, that were on the side of the North, were the two main forces the U.S. faced. Confusing just a little. The Marine Recon usually had two types of operations, known as Green and Black Ops. The Green Ops were recon missions, gaining intel and reporting back to operations for attacks on the targets. The more detailed the intel, the more successful the attacks. Green Ops required stealth, getting in and getting out undetected. If a shot was fired on a Green Op, it was considered a failure, and often resulted in a dead or captured Marine. The second type of Op was a Black Op, quick raids on selected targets with the aid of air or naval gun support. Get in, take out the target, and get out. The Marine Recon was exceptional at both kinds of ops, better than the Navy SEALs. When everyone was ready, about 15 men, they gathered just outside the tent in what was referred to as the conference area. Command had gotten some intel about a small supply unit moving through the northern area. The Recon's main patrolling area was from just north of Da Nang up to the DMZ. Their job that day was to see that the supply unit did not get through. After receiving their orders, they were led up the jungle by Staff Sergeant Sean Newport, the first of many trips into the beautiful Nam countryside for Chuck and Jason. The first assignment proved to be a simple one. They made their way up the area where the supply unit would pass through and set up a trap. The intel was from local sources, so they hoped they weren't the ones being set up. In Nam, you just didn't know. They had been in position about 30 minutes when the supply unit came through. They executed the plan just as Staff Sergeant Newport had laid it out. It was over in minutes and they were on their way back to base. Not a single Marine wounded. "Did you kill any?" Jason asked Chuck. There'd only been 10. "It's hard to say. I know I fired, but how do you know which one was the kill shot? How about you?" Jason answered, "Yeah, same here. It's hard to tell." There would be many trips like that, and on some of those trips it wasn't hard to tell at all. After 6 months in country, Chuck and Jason decided there wasn't much in Nam that wouldn't try to kill you. At least it sure seemed that way. One day they were on patrol walking through this little village when a young boy who looked about 11 or 12 comes walking up to the patrol. Everyone was instantly on alert. Anyone approaching the patrol could be a danger. Even an 11 or 12-year-old boy, or girl for that matter. A lesson they learned the hard way. The boy stopped just short of Jason and raised his hands. With a big grin, he said to Jason in good English, "Would you like to buy my sister?" He pointed to a small hut just sitting off the road where a girl was standing. She didn't look much older than the boy. Jason gave a low grunt, and the boy must have thought it was a positive response. It wasn't. Jason was disgusted, but a couple of the guys were going to take him up on the offer. Staff Sergeant Newport walked over to see what was going on. They explained to him what was happening when someone yelled, "Incoming!" Everyone hit the dirt. It was one single mortar round, and Chuck could tell it had landed to his right in the direction of the hut. Everyone did a quick survey of the area. There was a slight rise off to the north, probably where the mortar came from. Newport dispatched a couple of Marines to check it out, while everyone else remained under cover. The 2 Marines returned shortly, telling Newport they had found the spot where the mortar was launched, but whoever had launched it was gone. They didn't spot anyone else in the area. It wasn't an area you would expect the Kong to be. When everyone stood up quickly, those who hadn't noticed before saw that the hut was gone. The only sign of the girl was what appeared to be parts laying around, and the boy was nowhere to be seen. Newport got them all together. "Men, if you're going to survive this place, you better learn some things real quick. These people don't care to die. You're the enemy, and they will do whatever it takes to kill you. If a few of them die in the process, they don't care. What you saw today was a simple setup. They set up the boy and the girl and waited for someone to come along. It just happened to be us. The ideal was to draw as many as possible to the hut. You saw what happened. Lucky for us, they didn't have a good line of sight on the target. They must have been working off a time schedule. The coordinates on the mortar were preset. After the predetermined amount of time had elapsed, they fired the mortar and got the heck out of Dodge. They don't care that the girl died, and they wouldn't care if the boy had too. They were hunting U.S. soldiers and dang near got a couple. The boy got away, so he'll tell them they missed. But they'll keep trying in ways you can't even imagine. So keep it zipped up, fellas. I know some of you have been here a long time, but there are plenty of women in Japan and back home if you live to get back there." He stood. "Move out. We're headed back." Most days were normal patrols with few engagements with the enemy. But there were other times when things got crazy real fast. The Kong had caves all over the place. They would just pop up out of nowhere. Their squad was out on patrol, just like most days, when suddenly they came under heavy fire. They lost a couple of guys right off, and for a time it didn't look good for the rest of them. They dug in the best they could and radioed for air support. Fortunately, it didn't take long for the air support to arrive, and they were able to get it together and fall back. Chuck had just started to move when he heard Jason. "Chuck, I'm hit." He crawled over to Jason and did a quick inspection. He was hit twice. Once in the leg and in the right stomach area. Chuck was no expert on wounds, but he knew the one in the stomach area didn't look good, and Jason had lost consciousness. Chuck didn't have long before the Kong returned. He hoisted his friend to his shoulders and began his retreat. He didn't know how far he carried Jason, but finally he caught up with the rest of the unit. Chuck placed Jason on the ground, checked to see that he was still breathing, then went to Newport, who was talking to the radioman. Newport looked up and saw Chuck covered in blood. "You hit?" Chuck looked at his clothes. Jason's blood. "No, but Atwood was, and he's bleeding pretty bad." Newport nodded. "We've got a chopper on the way to get the wounded. Should be here any time." Chuck heard the approaching chopper. Jason was loaded on the chopper with the rest of the wounded. Then the chopper was up and gone. Chuck had a strange, empty feeling as he watched that chopper fade away. The dead, 4 total, were loaded on the next chopper, and the living on the next. After the debriefing back at base, Chuck raced off to find out how Jason was doing. When he got to the medical tent, he discovered Jason had been flown to the Navy medical ship just off the coast. All they would tell him was Jason was in bad shape, but alive, when he was loaded on the chopper. Chuck spent the rest of the day using what contacts he had to get an update on Jason. Finally, one of the radio units contacted the ship. They were told Jason was out of surgery but still in critical condition. Chuck would be contacted if there was any change. Chuck got very little sleep that night. or the next few nights for that matter, because at 0500 hours they were headed up country for a little payback. They chased the Kong back into the holes for what seemed like a month, but was only a week. Sadly, the Kong wouldn't stay in their holes. That's the way it was. The Kong would strike and the Americans would strike back. That's how it went, repeatedly. As soon as Chuck got back to base, he headed for the radio hut. His contact had heard nothing concerning Jason, but would see what he could find out. Jason was still alive, but in bad shape. They had flown him to the Okinawa Marine Base, away from the fighting. Chuck's contact would keep trying, but it could take some time. Chuck thanked him and headed back to his tent to get cleaned up and find some food. Days went by with no word on Jason. It was almost as if they'd lost him. Chuck's unit received replacements for the men they had lost. The fighting didn't stop just because a few men were killed. No, it was regroup, reload, and get back at it. For Chuck, it was like getting back at it with one hand tied behind his back. It seemed once you had the enemy where you wanted them, it was disengage and fall back. Chuck didn't think this is the way war should be fought. A lot of people didn't. The new replacements were ready to go. They wanted to see some action. Chuck just looked at them and thought, let's see how you feel in a couple months. One of the replacements walked over and threw his stuff on Jason's bunk. Chuck was about to tell him that bunk was taken when, for the first time, he noticed Jason's stuff was gone. Chuck didn't say a word. He guessed that wasn't taken after all. He lay on his bunk thinking about Jason's stuff being gone, wondering what that implied. He could hear the new guy settling in. This guy was about 6 feet 4 inches in height and couldn't have weighed over $170. And Chuck found himself wondering how this guy got in the Marines. He also knew you couldn't always judge a book by its cover. When the fellow finally got his gear stored away, he turned to Chuck. Name's Edward McNew. Everybody calls me Mac. You been here long? Chuck looked up at him. Long enough, about 8-9 months. Mac nodded. Is it as bad as they say it is over here? Back home, they talk about this place like it's the end of the world. Don't know. You tell me in a couple months if you're still alive. And Chuck turned away. Mac made no reply. Sunrise saw them out on patrol, just another day in paradise. Then it got cloudy and started to rain and stayed that way for weeks. Mac turned out to be quite a talker, mostly to Chuck. He also turned out to be quite a shooter. His eyesight was excellent. He'd spot things that nobody else could see. Several times it saved lives, which was always important. It appeared Mac wanted to be friends, but Chuck came here with a friend he couldn't locate, and Chuck wasn't ready for another. In fact, they had a saying, don't make friends. Friends get you killed. But the Marines also had a motto, no man left behind. And that was more important than the friend thing. Speaking of the no man left behind thing, there was this one guy, Alan Trimble, also from Harlan County, Kentucky. He had to be packed home every night they went out or every time they got in a firefight. The wounds were always minor, a little R&R, and he'd be right back with the unit. Chuck had to carry him out twice. Not serious wounds, but bad enough. They'd patch him up and send him right back. They were out on patrol, and sure enough, Alan was injured again. Bamboo shoot in the side, a booby trap that had not worked the way it was supposed to. If it had, Alan would be dead. And sure enough, Chuck was dispatched to get him back to base for the third time. Chuck asked, Alan, are you trying to get sent back home? Because if you are, you're going to get yourself killed. Alan grinned. Sadly, nope. I won't say I like it here, but I'm here to do my part. After that, if I'm still breathing, I'll go home to Kentucky and family mine. Heck, I never thought I'd say that. How about you, Chuck? You going back to Kentucky once you leave this hellhole? Chuck hadn't thought much about it. He paused a minute. First thing I'm going to do is look up an old friend that seems to have disappeared on me. And then I don't know. Alan responded, well, if you come back to Harlan, I could get you a job as a firefighter. You seem to be good at carrying people. Chuck faked a stumble. Shut up and enjoy the ride. This is your last one. And it was his last ride with Chuck. The wound got infected. Something they had put on the bamboo. Alan didn't die, but he did get shipped back stateside. Chuck didn't hear from him until some time later. Mac, meanwhile, was a totally different story. He never even seemed to get a scratch, and he stayed right by Chuck's side most of the time. Chuck learned all he wanted to know about Vermont, Mac's home state, about his girl back home and what he planned to do once he got home. Mac had big plans. And then came the letter. A Dear John letter. Nothing dear about those letters. And Mac wasn't any different. Chuck could never figure out why the girls always felt compelled to tell the guys they were breaking up with them while they were off fighting in a war. The guys would get so tore up that it put them and everyone around them at risk. Chuck had already decided he didn't like women's ways that much, and he liked them less every day. But they sure were pretty. That's something his dad always said. Son, you'll never understand them, but they sure are pretty. Chuck would remember things about his dad from time to time, and they always made him smile. Like most men, Mac got over it with time, and in fact, he was too busy worrying about staying alive than the girl back home. The Marines weren't known for having much sympathy about such things. In fact, they told you right up front what would happen. At the time, everybody thought they were just trying to rile you up or joking, but they weren't. They were trying to prepare you for everything they could because they knew you'd need it. A few months passed and the rain stopped. Mac quit talking about the girl and his big plans for later, but he by no means quit talking. He was starting to grow on Chuck. At least that's what some joked about. Hey Chuck, Mac's so far up behind in it's almost like he's a growth. Just guys having fun when they can in a world gone crazy. Chuck didn't mind, and Mac, well, Mac was Mac. Chuck quickly found that although Mac didn't look like much of a soldier, he was one of the best. He was quiet as a mouse in the jungle and superb marksman with keen eyesight and a superb attention for detail. He was also quick on his feet and quick to act. Good with a knife and stronger than you would think. Yep, Mac was beginning to grow on him. Over time, Mac kind of took Jason's spot. Not that he had forgotten Jason. He tried to locate Jason every chance he got, but there was no finding him. He had tracked him all the way back to Lejeune, but the trail ended there. Jason had gotten over his wounds and gone on a weekend pass and never came back. The Marines had listed him as AWOL, but that didn't sound like the Jason Chuck knew. He had contacted some of Jason's people in Harlan. They said he came home for a pass, but had returned to the camp. No one had heard from him since he left Harlan. Chuck worried about it some, but he couldn't do anything about it from where he was. He would figure it out when he got back to the States. Chuck knew he wasn't invincible, but he always felt he would go home. He couldn't explain it. It was just something he felt. There were close calls, but he always got out of them with Mac's help. Most of their ops were very successful, and nobody had even known they'd been there, unless they took someone with them when they left. There was an occasional rescue mission, which Chuck liked, and occasional capture. He liked any mission when no bullets were fired, especially at him. It didn't seem so to Chuck, but time did pass and the day finally came. His tour of duty was over and he was being sent stateside. Chuck shook Mac's hand and told him he would catch up with him when he got home. He was returning to Lejeune, and Mac had also requested that base when his tour was over. Chuck loaded up to leave Nam. He didn't know if he'd be back, but he sure hoped not. He had had enough killing for a while, forever. That's how Chuck felt at the time, but it sure didn't turn out that way. The part about returning to Nam, the killing part, not so much. Chuck had a brief layover in Hawaii, where he didn't do much but sit around and soak up the sun. He didn't get much rest, too many thoughts of Nam running through his head. Then he was off to Camp Pendleton in California for a brief stay, and then to Camp Lejeune. Once at Lejeune, Chuck opted out of recon. He decided he wanted to be a helicopter mechanic. I look over at Sarah, and she's sound asleep. I repeat my ritual of kissing her forehead, tucking her in tightly, and bidding her good night. Good night, little princess. As I left the room, I flipped off the light. And that is chapter 2. I was going to do more than one chapter, but these chapters and the way I read them takes me forever. So next chapter is chapter 3, Looking for Jason, and that will be next week's video. If you all like these videos, please give them a big thumbs up. And don't forget, guys, all of these books are listed in my Amazon storefront, which is linked down below. You can get the Kindle version for free currently. So if you like these books and you want to leave a review just to kind of get them out there, you can purchase them, which is free, on Kindle and leave a review and then say where you heard the book at. That would definitely help us out and get them out there a little more. The more reviews the books have, the more Amazon pushes them. I'm really, really proud of my dad, which is why I continue to read these books. And I absolutely love them, and I hope you all love them as well. If you all enjoyed this video, again, please give it a big thumbs up and don't forget to hit that subscribe button before you leave. I hope you all are having a beautifully blessed evening, morning, noon, night, no matter what time it is, wherever you are when you're watching this. I genuinely hope it's blessed, and I'll see y'all in my next one. Bye, guys.